Water pollution by William and Thomas.
The Citarum River on the island of Java in Indonesia is considered one of the most polluted rivers in the world. Large sections of the river have so much plastic and other garbage that you can't even see the water beneath it. This might come as no surprise, as 500 factories are built along the riverbanks. Nearly 60% of the river's fish species have died. On a daily basis, the Citarum River gets around 20,000 tons of waste and 340,000 tons of wastewater. Ozersk in Russia used to be named Chelyabinsk 40, or City 40 as it was called by the locals. This city was a secret for many, many years. No one was allowed to enter and no one was allowed to leave. This was because the Soviet Union discovered the nuclear bomb. They had some knowledge of how nuclear physics worked because they had spies in the Manhattan Project. So they built a nuclear power plant near the city and kept it secret from the public. There was a problem. They didn't know everything.
For example, they decided to handle plutonium with their bare hands. They also didn't know where to put all the nuclear waste they had from their research. First, they kept them in underground cooling containers, but they found this as a minor inconvenience because they had to cool the containers. So they found a nearby river that flowed into the River Ob, which flows into the Arctic Ocean, and started dumping the nuclear waste in it. This was bad because the other villages along this river relied on the water for drinking. Many of the villages became sick and showed visual signs of radiation poisoning. This was bad, so the Soviet Union decided to find a lake that had little to none villages around it. There was one lake that seemed ideal, Lake Karachay. It was smaller than the lake stated earlier, but there were no villages around it. The Soviet Union started dumping tons of nuclear waste into Lake Karachay. This lake got so radioactive that standing around it for an hour would be lethal.
There was a nuclear disaster at the Mayak plant called the Kishtim disaster. This was a level 6 on the nuclear scale, with the only disasters being level 7 were the Hiroshima disaster and the Chernobyl disaster. Eventually, the lake dried out, but not completely. The radioactive particles were still in the ground from when the lake came back. When it did, it was radioactive again. Today, it looks beautiful, except it is unsafe to swim in. And even some time around it will give you a lethal dose of radiation. Lake Tai in China was once a clean and pristine lake. However, more than 2,800 factories have been dumping their waste into the lake. As a result, the water has turned green thanks to the amount of industrial chemicals and waste. Nearly 2 million people that have once been dependent on the lake have been forced to stop using the water. The stench from the lake is so strong that it can be detected from miles away. Worldwide, unsanitary water is drunk by nearly 2 billion people. This water is not only dirty, but also able to transmit diseases such as cholera and typhoid. Drinking dirty water is the cause of 4% of all deaths and 5.7% of all disabilities or ill health around the world. More than 50% of people in developing countries have, at some point, been affected by a sanitation-affected illness. Contaminated drinking water causes more than 500,000 deaths, many due to diseases such as cholera, dysentery, typhoid, and polio. Even though water pollution is that bad, there is still some hope for our waterways. In many countries, regulations have been set up to prevent industry and agriculture from pouring pollutants into our lakes, rivers, and oceans. Treatment plants treat contaminated water to make it safe to drink. However, the regulation of pollutants shift with the political winds. If the new president doesn't like environmental laws that are in place, they can be removed, causing setbacks in stopping water pollution. For example, the United States loosened environmental protections that prevented landowners from dumping pollutants.
Thanks for watching!